Good morning. I'm Nova Blake, and this is your complete political briefing for Sunday, May 3rd, 2026. Today, Trump formally declares Iran hostilities terminated. While Iran fires back with a 14-point peace proposal he says he is not satisfied with. The Pentagon pulls 5,000 troops from Germany, and Spirit Airlines shuts down forever. Let's get into it. Starting with the top stories from across the American political landscape. President Trump formally declared to Congress on Friday, May 1st, that hostilities with Iran have terminated, a legally stunning assertion made in letters to House Speaker Mike Johnson and Senate President pro tempore Chuck Grassley on the same day as the War Powers Resolution's 60-day deadline. Trump wrote that the hostilities that began on February 28, 2026, have terminated, but also acknowledged in the same letters that the threat posed by Iran remains significant and that the conflict may be far from over. Legal scholars immediately challenged the declaration as legally baseless, noting that the War Powers Resolution does not recognize a ceasefire as a termination of hostilities, and that the United States Navy continues to enforce an active blockade of Iranian ports. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer called the claim a blatant attempt to skirt federal law. Iran submitted a 14-point peace proposal to American negotiators through Pakistani intermediaries on Friday and Saturday, its most detailed response yet to the United States-led effort to end the war. Key demands in the Iranian proposal include resolving all outstanding issues and ending the war within 30 days rather than the 2-month ceasefire the United States had proposed, guarantees against future military aggression, the withdrawal of American forces from Iran's surrounding region, an end to the naval blockade, the release of frozen Iranian assets, payment of war reparations, the lifting of all sanctions, an end to the fighting in Lebanon, and a new framework governing passage through the Strait of Hormuz. Trump initially told reporters Friday he was not satisfied with the proposal, then said Saturday he had been briefed on the concept of the deal and was still looking at it, while writing on social media that he could not imagine the plan being acceptable because Iran had not yet paid a big enough price. The Pentagon announced Friday that the United States will withdraw approximately 5,000 troops from Germany over the next 6 to 12 months, delivering on President Trump's public threat following German Chancellor Friedrich Merz's criticism of the American war in Iran. Merz had said the United States was being humiliated by Iran's leadership and that Washington lacked a coherent strategy in the conflict. The Pentagon said the withdrawal sends a very clear signal that Germany and other allies must take primary responsibility for Europe's conventional defense. Poland's prime minister called the move a disastrous trend that threatens to disintegrate the transatlantic alliance. Trump separately told reporters the United States planned to withdraw a lot further than 5,000 troops and asked about Spain and Italy, where American bases host thousands of NATO troops, said he was probably considering troop reductions there too. Senator Susan Collins of Maine voted with Democrats for the first time Thursday to support a War Powers Resolution that would have halted the Iran war, becoming the first Republican senator to do so since the conflict began in late February. The resolution still failed 50 to 47, with Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky and Senator John Curtis of Utah also joining Collins in crossing party lines. Collins said in a statement that the 60-day deadline is not a suggestion, it is a requirement, and called on the president to present a defined strategy for closing out the conflict. Her vote represents a significant shift in the Republican coalition supporting the war and comes as Senators Tillis of North Carolina, Murkowski of Alaska, Curtis of Utah, and Josh Hawley of Missouri have all publicly said they want a war authorization vote before the conflict continues further. Spirit Airlines ceased all flight operations Saturday morning, becoming the first major American airline to shut down in 25 years. The ultra-low-cost carrier, which had filed for bankruptcy twice since 2024, had been seeking a $500 million federal bailout from the Trump administration, but those talks failed to produce a deal. Spirit's collapse stranded thousands of passengers who had already purchased tickets, with other airlines including Frontier, Allegiant, and Southwest offering discounted fares to affected travelers. The airline's failure eliminates one of the only remaining low-cost options for budget travelers in the United States and marks the end of a carrier that had served dozens of American cities. Iran's parliament took an extraordinary step this week, advancing legislation that would formally restrict which vessels may pass through the Strait of Hormuz under Iranian sovereignty law. The bill, advancing through the Majlis under emergency procedures, would permanently ban Israeli-flagged vessels from the strait, require ships from countries Iran designates as hostile to pay reparations-based fees for transit permits, and grant Iran's Revolutionary Guard expanded legal authority to board and inspect suspicious vessels. If signed into law and enforced, the measure would transform the Strait of Hormuz from an internationally recognized waterway under transit passage rights into a toll and permit system controlled exclusively by Iran's military, a move American and European maritime legal experts have called a violation of international law of the sea. Golden Tempo, a 23-1 long shot, won the 152nd Kentucky Derby on Saturday at Churchill Downs in Louisville, Kentucky, and in doing so made trainer Cherie DeVaux the first woman in the 152-year history of the race to train the winner of the opening leg of the Triple Crown. DeVaux, a French-born trainer based in Louisiana, overcame a deep field of 19 horses, including several heavy favorites. Jockey Jose Ortiz rode Golden Tempo to victory in front of a sold-out crowd of more than 150,000 people. The win is also the first Derby victory for owner Charles Ogden Jr. It is the defining sports story of the first weekend of May in America. Bard College President Leon Botstein announced his retirement Friday, effective at the end of June, 50 years after first taking over as leader of the small liberal arts institution in Annandale-on-Hudson, New York. The decision came months after the Justice Department released Epstein documents showing that Botstein had a far deeper relationship with the late Jeffrey Epstein than he had previously disclosed, including multiple personal meetings, a helicopter visit Epstein made to Bard, a request from Botstein to include Epstein at the 2013 commencement, and a note from Botstein expressing personal sympathy to Epstein in 2018 after new reporting about his criminal history. An independent review by Wilmer Hale found that Botstein did nothing illegal but had minimized and was not fully accurate in describing his relationship with Epstein. Botstein will remain on the Bard faculty as a teacher and musician. The United States fast-tracked $8 billion in arms sales to 4 Middle Eastern allies on Friday: Israel, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, and Kuwait, covering air defense systems, laser-guided rockets, and other precision munitions. The sales were announced through State Department clearances filed Friday and represent the administration's effort to bolster allied military capabilities in the region as the Iran ceasefire remains fragile and peace talks remain stalled. The announcement came on the same day Trump declared hostilities with Iran terminated, a juxtaposition that drew sharp criticism from congressional Democrats who said the weapons transfers proved the war was far from over. Iran's Revolutionary Guard announced Saturday it remains on full standby for a return to hostilities, and a senior Iranian military officer told state media that renewed fighting is likely, just hours after Trump said he was not satisfied with Iran's 14-point proposal. Iran's deputy foreign minister said the ball is in America's court to choose between diplomacy or confrontation. The IRGC said it had detected no genuine commitment from Washington to peace and warned that the room for American decision-making has narrowed. The Iranian parliament's simultaneous move to codify restrictions on Strait of Hormuz access added another layer of escalation to an already tense standoff that all sides acknowledge is only one miscalculation away from reigniting. Now turning to Washington and the latest actions from the current administration. Here are 10 significant developments from the administration this week. President Trump formally declared to Congress that hostilities with Iran have terminated in a letter timed to coincide with the 60-day War Powers Resolution deadline on Friday, May 1st. The letter asserts that the ceasefire, now in its fourth week, constitutes a legal termination of hostilities under constitutional war powers doctrine, a position the administration is advancing without any statutory basis in the text of the 1973 law. Legal scholars from both parties and across the political spectrum immediately challenged the assertion, with Harvard Law School professor Jack Goldsmith writing that the letter misreads the statute and the history. The same letter simultaneously acknowledged that the threat posed by Iran to the United States and its armed forces remains significant. Defense Secretary Hegseth ordered the withdrawal of 5,000 troops from Germany on Friday, to be completed over the next 6 to 12 months. The National Defense Authorization Act for 2026 restricts the Pentagon from reducing troops in the European theater below 76,000, without certifying to Congress that the decision was made in coordination with NATO allies. Hegseth's senior officials characterized the withdrawal as a reprioritization toward the Western Hemisphere and Indo-Pacific theaters, and said Germany and Europe must step up to take primary responsibility for their own conventional defense. The withdrawal does not include the Tomahawk and Hypersonic Missile Long-Range Fires Battalion that had been scheduled to deploy to Germany. That deployment has also been canceled. The Trump administration fast-tracked $8 billion in arms sales to Israel, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, and Kuwait on Friday through State Department clearance notices, one of the largest single-day regional arms sale announcements since Trump took office. The weapons include air defense systems for Kuwait and Qatar and laser-guided rockets for Qatar, the UAE, and Israel. The sales are designed to replenish regional allies' military stockpiles following nearly 10 weeks of wartime consumption and to enhance their ability to defend against Iranian missile and drone attacks. The announcement came the same day Trump declared the war had terminated, a contradiction critics were quick to highlight. The administration's posture on Iran's 14-point peace proposal remains under active review, with Trump saying Saturday he had been briefed on the concept and was still examining the details. Senior Iranian officials described the proposal as a significant concession in that it moved all nuclear enrichment discussions to a final phase of negotiations, allowing a framework agreement on the war and the blockade to be reached first without resolving the most contentious nuclear issues. Trump wrote on social media that Iran had not yet paid a big enough price, and said renewed strikes remained possible if Tehran misbehaves. The White House has not formally transmitted a response through Pakistani intermediaries as of Saturday evening. Iran's parliament is advancing legislation to formalize control over the Strait of Hormuz in a way that would permanently restrict Israeli vessels and require hostile nations' ships to obtain paid transit permits. The bill has advanced under emergency procedures in the Majlis and would legally empower Iran's Revolutionary Guard to board and inspect any vessel seeking passage under the new framework. The United States, European Union, and major maritime powers have consistently maintained that the strait is governed by the 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS, under which all states enjoy the right of transit passage that cannot be suspended or restricted by a coastal state. The Senate Banking Committee's approval of Kevin Warsh as Federal Reserve Chair sets up a full Senate confirmation vote as soon as next week, when Congress returns from its recess. Jerome Powell announced he will remain on the Federal Reserve Board of Governors after his chairmanship expires on May 15th, and has said he will contest any attempt to remove him through legal proceedings. The simultaneous presence of Warsh as incoming chair and Powell as a sitting board member would be unprecedented in the Federal Reserve's history. International financial institutions have expressed concern about the dual leadership situation during a period of active wartime inflation management. The administration's $8 billion Middle East arms package also reflects a strategic communication intended to reassure Gulf Arab states that the United States remains committed to their security, even as it simultaneously pursues a peace settlement with Iran. Qatar and the UAE have been serving as back-channel mediators in the Iran war alongside Pakistan, and both countries house major American military installations. The Trump administration has maintained that its Gulf Arab partners remain steadfastly behind the American military campaign, despite public calls from several Gulf governments for a negotiated resolution. Spirit Airlines' closure leaves thousands of employees without work and hundreds of thousands of ticket holders in limbo. The Department of Transportation confirmed it is working to ensure passengers receive refunds and has urged other carriers to honor Spirit tickets at reasonable rates. The administration had been in talks with Spirit about a federal rescue package, but those discussions collapsed in April. Trump administration officials said the free market must be allowed to operate and that the government is not in the business of bailing out airlines. Spirit's collapse is the most prominent corporate casualty of the Iran war's economic fallout to date, which has pushed jet fuel prices to levels unseen since the pandemic. The administration is managing a growing transatlantic rift over the Germany troop withdrawal, with European allies calling emergency consultations through NATO channels. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk warned the withdrawal was an irreversible step toward disintegration of the alliance. Germany's defense minister Boris Pistorius said the withdrawal was anticipated, but downplayed its immediate impact, noting that 60 to 65,000 American troops will remain in Europe following the drawdown. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte asked to speak with Trump directly following the announcement. The withdrawal comes as European defense spending is surging. Most NATO members have now met or exceeded the alliance's 2% of GDP defense spending target. The Kentucky Derby was the top-watched sporting event of the week, with Saturday's race at Churchill Downs drawing a record television audience as Americans looked for respite from weeks of Iran war coverage, economic anxiety, and political turmoil. Cherie DeVaux' historic training victory for Golden Tempo, the first woman to train a Derby winner in the race's 152-year history, drew praise from across the political spectrum, with President Trump posting congratulations on social media from Florida. The race's record-setting 23-1 odds for the winner reflected the unpredictability of the field and the overall spirit of the two-minute sporting spectacle at Churchill Downs. That's your full briefing for Sunday, May 3rd, 2026. I'm Nova Blake. Stay informed, stay ahead. We'll see you next time.